The Friends of King Board did this at the request of a community, and I think that's what the legislation and the intent of our legislators and this board is to have communities come together and complete these applications, hopefully for the best interest of our kids. I can appreciate, Mr. Romer, that you have issues with the process. I don't think any of us left yesterday thinking that this process that you all have is in any way perfect or can't be improved or hasn't shown some clinks. Absolutely. But equity does not require that we penalize everyone when there's a problem. Equity and democracy requires that we uplift those who have been marginalized. And I think in this community, we uplift those schools that may not have been treated fairly in this process, but not penalize those that have come to you and have said, we have done everything we could, and we can do better. We can do what it is that is the intent of the legislature and the intent of the community in raising test scores and raising quality education for our children. So, Mr. Romer, while I don't expect you to change your mind today, I hope that you think like me and others, that we don't penalize the good in order to acknowledge what is bad, but instead we work to improve systems that are bad. Please don't penalize King, because I won't marginalize you by saying you've had an attack of conscience. I think you've had conscience all along, but that you found a problem in the process. Let's fix that process for the Landry School and others that have come forward and said, we want more time to come to this board and do whatever it is that we can do to help them, not only this board, not only the department, but the New Orleans community, to get over that hurdle, to get their application in and do what we know we need to do in the New Orleans community, and that is repair our schools and educate our kids.
Thank you, Ms. Washington. Board members, there is a motion and a second on the floor to deny item number 5. Are there anyone else want to speak to it? Has not already spoken twice.
I'd like to.
Ms. Johnson.
When that motion is carried, I'd like to make another motion, because I do think that we have some issues here that need to be addressed, and they need to be addressed in a very timely manner. And to me, that timely manner is as of January 31st, which.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. I'll allow that.
And so I'm going to.
Okay, let me dispense with the motion. That's what you asked for. Anyone else want to speak to this item?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
And what happens to the other 3 schools? Are you pulling those 2, or what? How do we make that equitable if we vote for this?
I want to make sure we get them all in the same situation,
right,
and then we can deal with it going forward.
Excuse me, what are the 2
You know, if we're not, excuse me, Ms. Gibbons, I have not recognized you.
I have the floor, please.
Ms. Buquet has the floor.
I just want to be sure that I understand what I'm voting for, and I understand the intent, because it was very evident yesterday that we weren't on that field. What happens to those others is my question. Are you pulling?
That's the motion I'm gonna make.
Those?
I think
that's what your motion would do.
My intention is to get them all in the same status.
Right.
And we'll pull those as well. I think Ms. Johnson was going to do something to that effect.
Again, there must be something wrong with the mics. We never can hear Ms. Johnson down here.
Oh, I got to use my teacher voice that they didn't get.
Yes, ma'am, you do. Okay, you finished, Ms. Buquet?
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Pastrak, do you have a question, Ms. Gibbons?
Yes.
Okay, I'll recognize Mr. Pastrak, and I'll recognize you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to understand, what action do you want to take with respect to these several schools? You're just going to deny them all? Is that what your intention is?
Well, here's my intention.
I'm just trying to understand. I'm trying to figure out how we're going to deal with all of this.
I understand. I believe that it is possible for applications at this point to be addressed again. Now, logistically, financially, I'm not certain what that means, but I believe the process does allow some more time for consideration. Again, I can't pass judgment on the logistics of it now. So what I'm suggesting is we're going to deny these applicants. If there's reason, and if the department believes there's reason to explore certain applications further, that they've warranted and wants to bring us that reconsideration, then that's
So-
up to the department to do.
Just so I'm clear, you don't plan on taking any other action at this meeting with respect to these that you wish to deny?
That's
that
my
right?
intention.
Okay. So this would align the NASCA recommendations with, board action would align with the NASCA recommendations on these schools, which was to deny? Mr. Romer, is that your intent?
Say it again, I'm sorry.
That the board's action would align with NASCA's recommendation, which was to deny on these schools? Okay. Ms. Givens, and then Ms. Bendeley.
I believe the
That's the order.
superintendent and I had the same question, that I assumed that we were only, in this instance, addressing what happened yesterday with the King application to charter Craig School. And then I heard you say something about the 2 other schools that are similarly situated, and I want to know which schools are you thinking about?
Well, the schools I'm thinking about are the ones that, I want all of the denials.
Can you just tell me which names
What
or
number
numbers?
They're Cohen, Landry, Carver, and Reed. Those are the 4 that are.
Cohen, Landry, Carver, and Reed.
Board members, you're going to have to ask me to speak. Okay? Otherwise, we cannot operate this meeting properly as a board meeting. Okay? Do not speak out, please. This is not a conversation. This is a meeting.
I believe I had the floor.
Ms. Givens has the floor.
King, Landry, Carver, Cohen, and Reed are not similarly situated. And the motions, and so, Madam Chair, this then has changed the color of this discussion. Because if you're talking about just reversing the decision as to King, that was one situation. Cohen is another situation, and Cohen and Carver are in the same situation. Landry is somewhere else, and Reed was not
Okay.
even up for discussion.
Ms. Givens, we're going to take up each one of these schools separately. This will not be a decision about all 5 schools at one time.
I understand that,
okay,
but
so-
you're saying that
And
they're
when we
all-
get to that item, I'm going to let you make that point. But right now, the item that we're discussing is item number 5, which is the MLK school, and I want the conversation to stay on that item.
That is what I'm asking. Are we making
We are
sure-
only making a decision on MLK at this moment. I will make sure that you have the opportunity to make that point when we get to those schools. So there's a motion and a second on the floor to deny the application for Friends of King School, that's item 5, by Mr. Romer. Was seconded by Ms. Buquet. Is there any opposition to the motion?
Can I make a substitute motion now? Are we too far gone for that?
I will allow it.
I would like to make a substitute motion in that case, Madam President, that says that while we recognize the exceptions that were made for Dr. King, that the application be conditionally approved to allow them until whatever timeline it is in January to resubmit their application for review and successful review by the department and the
I asked to pull item 13 for a reason.
Ms. Johnson,
I'm sorry, Miss.
It's okay.
I'm going to get it.
I'm going to keep working with you.
I asked to pull item number 13 because I thought we were going to have a motion to line up these schools so that it would be the same. And number 13 was Reed. And the conversation yesterday on Reed was that their problem was that they were associated with K-12 Inc. That seems to be what their major problem was. And so what I was trying to do was to say if Cohen, Landry, Carver, Reed, and King had some kind of deficiencies that could be corrected between now and January 31, that's what we ought to do.
Ms. Johnson, I'm going to, point of order, I'm looking at this item. The motion on this item is to receive this application, which was in effect a denial. It is specific to Sarah Reed. How are you trying to bring a decision on other schools into this one? I don't think this is clear.
Okay, it's really not, and I went through and
Yeah.
looked at all of the information that's in this particular packet, and we talked about having some relationships yesterday through MOUs with certain of these schools, but I can't find it reflected in here.
May I, Ms. Johnson, as I recall that conversation, and it was a motion made by Ms. Givens and seconded by me, that there would be a receive and refer off the board agenda at the end of today's meeting that would address that issue. It's not addressed in today. The action addressed in today's committee is purely the action on the application. So
let me
we're not losing that.
Okay, may I ask a process question?
Yes, ma'am.
The process, and I believe Chaz and what we're trying to do is to see how to put equity into this process for those schools that we were denied.
Okay.
I'm not trying to do
Madam
that.
Chair.
Now, all I'm trying to figure out is how to do that by January 31st. So
Okay,
whatever we can do, I'll do it.
May I read to you the motion that is reflected in the board agenda today that we will act on, Ms. Johnson, to see if it, and I'm going to read it to you. Make sure I'm reading the right one. Here it is. A motion of Ms. Givens, seconded by Ms. Dastuk. The Recovery School District Committee recommends that the board refer to the Recovery School District Committee in January 2011 consideration of the development of a memorandum of understanding between the Recovery School District and Carver Alumni Association.
That's what we did.
Now, what we can do, Ms. Johnson, is when we get to that item in the board agenda, you can amend that to include other schools. And that way it would capture the schools that you're interested in capturing. Ms. Givens.
Ms. Johnson, I'm really sitting over here very puzzled. The reason we handled Cohen and Carver the way we did was because the superintendents and I agreed that these two sets of people are not similarly situated as the other groups. They have worked on this for 3 years with Mr. Vallis, and he sat there at the table and told you that. And that's why Ms. Dastuk suggested that we handle them in this way. And now what you're doing is going to turn over all of the work that we accomplished on yesterday for those two schools.
No.
And Ms. Johnson, I have to take exception to this.
I'm not trying to do that, Ms.
But it's
Givens.
what you're doing.
Okay, we're not having a conversation again. Thank you, Ms. Givens. Ms. Johnson, please hold. I'm going to recognize Ms. Bendley, then Mr. Romer, and Ms. Johnson, if you need me to come back to you, I will. Ms. Bendley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make 2 quick points. First, if by receiving the department's recommendation to not approve these applicants for a charter, that does not preclude the applicant from resubmitting, but as Mr. Romer pointed out, there will be some logistical considerations that we will have to we'll have to determine if there is time for the applicants to resubmit, and then logistically if we're able to pull together a team of evaluators and present a recommendation to the board in January. So again, by receiving the department's recommendation to essentially deny these applications, that will not preclude anyone from resubmitting, but there will be some logistical considerations. So there is no need to make a motion to allow them to resubmit. That's already allowed in law. And the second thing that I would just ask the board to consider is it appears as though in the minutes, for instance, on item 13, this was one that we recommended that the board essentially receive the report, which is not to recommend approval of this particular application. However, the minutes read that the board received the charter school application, not received the department's recommendation.
Okay.
And I believe it's worded that way in several of these, and that is a.
Okay, well, let's try to
That's
do
a
a
big
global
difference.
correction on that. I think it's just may I have a motion that anywhere that in an item that doesn't stop us from revisiting that item, anywhere that there is language in the minutes that says that the board received the Type 5 charter application, in fact, that be amended to say that the board received the department's recommended action.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Ms. Bradford, and yes, sir, just a second. Ms. Bradford and Ms. Buquet. So we clean that up. Thank you.
Madam Chairman.
One second, please, because I have, yes,
Point
ma'am.
of personal privilege, and now that you're talking about that, I want to tell the audience that as I was leaving this building last night, there was a member of our staff going out to get sandwiches. You remember, we hadn't stopped for dinner or anything. Our staff was working very, very late trying to get these minutes, and so I'm sure there may
no
be some
reflection
other
on our staff.
editorial comments
Right.
made, but thank you, staff, for being here and for doing so much.
Thank you for recognizing that. Our staff was here, I believe, many of them got home at 2 o'clock this morning, so they had a much longer day than we did. Mr. Romer?
Yeah, I will
And
remind
Mr.
members
Bayard.
quickly, because it was a long night last night, and one of the reasons certain actions were taken here is we determined that the law states that if an applicant was not, a type 5 applicant was not presented to us for approval, that there was no other action we could take other than receive the report. That's what the law states, and that's why we ended up taking the action that we did on all the ones that followed that were given to us only for receive purposes. Just a reminder, that's how we got there.
That's true. Very good point. Mr. Bayard and Ms. Givens, and then is there a motion on this item? Because as it sits? No, okay, so let's go. Mr. Bayard?
Yes, Ms. Benderly, I just have a general question. Charter schools get $100,000 to start up?
Charter schools are eligible to apply for a startup grant.
$100,000.
The maximum
Talking about the
amount.
loan?
I'm trying to.
Talk about the
Are
loan?
you referring to the loan or the grant program?
Is it advance? Is it a loan? What is it?
I believe you're referring to the grant program. There is a grant program that we have.
Mr. Bayard, is this germane, excuse me one second, is this germane to this item?
Well, I was just going to ask her because we denied a lot of them. I mean, we had some, of course, we had a lot more applicants. I'm just wondering about how a charter school gets started with no money. That's all.
No, that's not,
Well, the charter school applications that were recommended for approval had their budgets scrutinized
They
and
have to.
approved.
Madam Chair? The simple answer is they have to generate their own funds to get the application approved, but once approved, then they are eligible for the federal grants.
Okay.
And the federal grants could take a while.
Okay. If you need any more information, that we'll address it at a later time.
I move we receive item 13.
Okay, I have a motion to receive item 13. Is there a second?
second.
Second by Ms. Buquet. Is there any opposition to that motion? Motion carries.
I'm going to oppose it again.
Please record Ms. Givens as voting no.
Ms. Dastu,
Yes, Ms. Johnson.
I guess I'm still confused on, do I need to make a motion or direct the department to seek additional information on those charters that we had some discussion about
me ask.
yesterday between now and January 31st? Do I need to direct the department to do that?
Ms. Johnson, did you hear Ms. Benderly's explanation?
Did, but I'm
Are
trying
you-
to make sure that this happens. Because I'm trying to make sure that what we have here happens.
Would you just make that directive?
Okay, I'd like to move that we direct the department to contact the five applicants, ask them to resubmit, and then try to go through a process that will allow them, that would allow you all to bring us back a different recommendation. Or to bring.
Would you restate that? Because that's different than what you said earlier. You asked them to resubmit, and I think that's a bit of a challenge, given the time frame that exists in our current process, Ms. Johnson. If you want to encourage the department to work with these prospective applicants, and to also, what I understood yesterday was that they would look at the time frame to see what was feasible and then get back to the board. I think that is what was discussed yesterday. What you just put on the table is very different.
I understand that, and there's a reason for this, because we have denied, we have received the information on King, and the process is flawed. And even if, in my opinion, as we all know and said here, that the process was flawed yesterday, that there ought to be some way to allow for equity to come into this in a timely fashion. Now, I realize it's going to cause the
Right, I
staff
can handle it.
some anxiety. I also realize it's going to cost some additional dollars. But what we're talking about are people who have worked long hours, a year, some of them 2 years. And one group sat here and said they had been working 3 years. Well, there ought to be a way, even if it cost us some pain, because it was very painful for me to get this information on Friday and to try and get it on Saturday and to try and decipher what was in here. So if it was painful for me to do this, then maybe I'm trying to put a little bit more pain on the department to go on and handle this. Because I think it's
Madam Chair.
One second,
incumbent
yes,
on us
yes,
to
ma'am.
do this. I really do.
Okay, Ms. Johnson, I think you've made your point. I think you have a motion on the floor. I'm going to let the superintendent respond to it, Ms. Givens, and then I'm going to, if you can get a second, I'm going to move on that motion. Mr. Superintendent and Ms. Givens, and then Ms. Johnson's looking for a second. 1, 2, 3.
I just have to take issue that this is flawed. I don't think it's flawed. I think that people have great passion and great intent but they may not really know how to run a school. And that is what this process is intended to do. It's intended to weed that out. And sometimes we may agree, and sometimes we may disagree. And sometimes people interpret the denial as a flaw, and I can appreciate that. I have looked at the process, and I agree it can be improved on, but I don't think it's fundamentally flawed. I do think, as I said yesterday, if you want to create an appeal process, you should create an appeal process as a process that applies for all schools. Now what we're talking about, I think, is compounding the flaw, or compounding the weakness as you describe it, by creating an appeal process for 5 schools and not for other schools. And so I think it's a slippery slope when we try to go down this pathway. At the end of the day, the board has to make some tough decisions. I have to make some tough decisions. In my opinion, the 4 charters that we put forward, all of which NACSA denied, wasn't denied by me, all of which NACSA denied should be denied, period, and stop, come back again next year and have at it. But the one that we did see that they denied, that we approved, you can disagree with me on that, and you've done it, and that's your prerogative. I happen to believe that it was a good charter application. But we just disagree. But just because we disagree, or just because I identify one that I overrule, it doesn't mean it's flawed. I'll tell you this. In Race to the Top, Louisiana didn't win. The Secretary of Education had the ability to overrule the peer reviewers. He should have, but he didn't. In this case, I have the ability to overrule the peer reviewers. I should have, and I did. But we can disagree on that, but at the end of the day, that doesn't mean it's flawed.
Thank you, Superintendent. Ms. Gibbons, can you speak to Ms. Johnson's motion? That would be the appropriate. That would be the appropriate at this point. Please limit it.
I want to ask a question.
You can do that also.
Yesterday, I had intended to have Carver, Cohen, and Landry included in a process because of the history that these 3 schools have had in working with Mr. Vallis to operate community schools. Mr. Vallis told you on yesterday that he has in fact been working with those 3 schools. I did not include Reed because Reed does not have that history, and I think you'll appreciate that, Mr. Pastorek. And so we were tired, and Landry got stuck out in a different category, but they actually should be in the group with Cohen and Carver. Now, this is a question by these motions that are here now. Does that then negate the ability of those schools to develop their MOUs? Because the important thing is to secure the community participation piece that they bring to the table.
No, ma'am, as far as I can read this, it doesn't, there is already a motion.
Well, Landry is not in the group. So do I need to move to put Landry in the group with Carver and Cohen?
I'm going to let Jeanette advise.
Landry was in mine.
On motion
One
7,
second, guys.
it only includes Carver. It only includes Carver, so
Okay,
Thank
just
you.
let me try to
It
manage
includes
this.
Carver and Cohen, but Landry should be in there too, so I need to make a motion.
Okay, I already have a motion on the floor. Let me dispense with that. I'll come back
All
to
right.
you.
Fine.
Would you repeat the motion?
It is Ms. Well, actually, it's Ms. Johnson's motion. Did you capture it?
I will remove Reed, because I'm trying to get where you are, Ms. Gibbons, on what we were doing yesterday.
Okay, can I suggest that the 2 of you huddle, come up with one thing, and come back to the board? We can handle this within another charter school. This really isn't relevant to this item. Please huddle, come back with something you do agree on with a motion, and let's see if we can get it
Wait,
passed.
hold on, Ms. Dastu. The last time I'm saying this to Ms. Johnson, the last time I checked, I represent those people.
Yes, ma'am.
And so I am working.
But I'm
to their
asking you to work with
advantage.
a fellow board member.
I have talked to Ms. Johnson about this, and I really don't understand what she's doing.
Okay. There's a okay, Ms. Johnson, have you withdrawn your motion?
I just told you.
Okay, the motion fails for the lack of a second. The primary motion is back on the floor. It is to, have we moved on that motion?
Madam Chairman.
Okay. Does this pertain to this motion, Mr. Bayard?
Well, it just pertains to the fact that we shouldn't be talking
that
about
passed.
denials. I mean,
We should not be talking about denials. They did not belong on the agenda. The board cannot take any action on a recommended denial of a type 5. So all of this conversation is really moot.
and I
You're
wish
right,
we would
Mr. Bayard.
receive the results of I wish the results would be presented to us in October for a December vote. That way, all of these compromises, we could have worked a lot of this
Yeah,
out
I don't
in
think,
November.
as long as I'm in this chair, it won't happen again, I promise. Thank you. Okay, we go to the next item.
It's
I get my
it's
motion
item
now?
20.
We actually did vote on Mr. Romer's item. We did.
item
It's just been
24.
dispensed with.
Madam President,
Yes, ma'am.
now the appropriate time?
It absolutely is, if
All right,
if you have a motion.
Yes, I'd like to move that the applicants for Cohen, Carver, and Landry be similarly treated, and that the motion, what's the motion number that has Carver in it?
7.
Motion number 7 be expanded to include
Where is that?
Landry and Carver. Oh,
Okay.
Carver's there. That it be expanded to include Landry and Cohen. That's the other one.
Okay, so we need to pull item number 7 for reconsideration because it's already been approved.
Yes,
Okay, is there a motion to do that, Ms. Givens?
yes.
And a second by Ms. Bradford. The motion has been pulled. Ms. Givens has just offered a substitute motion. And do board members understand it? And is there a second to that substitute motion? Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Is there any opposition to the substitute motion on item 7?
I'm opposed.
Thank you, Mr. Romer. Please record Mr. Romer as being opposed.
Can I
Nina, is it okay if I rule this?
motion?
I just need clarification on the motion. May I
Okay.
repeat the motion?
I tried to go too fast. I'm going to ask Ms. Givens to repeat her motion.
I think I have it, I just wanted to make
Well,
sure. that-
okay, please repeat it.
So the motion on the floor now by Ms. Givens, seconded by Ms. Johnson, opposed by Mr. Romer, is the same motion as number 7, adding Cohen, Carver, and Landry, correct?
No, Carver is there.
I mean, adding
It's
Cohen
adding.
and Landry.
Correct.
Okay,
Okay.
we're not adding Reed or King, just Cohen and
Right.
Landry.
Madam President, bear with me.
Yes, ma'am.
The superintendent has asked me to include Cohen in this group, and I will.
Okay,
I mean, MLK.
King.
MLK.
It's subject to an MOU, so we'll see how it works, and then it comes back to the board, so you have final approval on it
okay,
anyway.
board members, Ms. Givens, please list the schools that will be captured inside this motion,
The
in this
schools will
MOU.
be Carver alumni, the Cohen alumni, the Landry, Friends of Lord Beaconsfield, and also the Friends of King.
Friends of King. Okay, everyone understand that motion? I think we have a first and a second. Since it's been amended, I'd like to ask for any opposition.
I'd like to make comment.
Landry's in there.
Mr. Romer, Mr. Romer, you may comment.
I'll keep it short. One, I don't know that the motion's in order. I don't know that we can take any action on these applications because they weren't presented to us for approval. Now, I may be wrong on that, and I can be overruled. I don't believe that. Number 2, by taking no action and us not grouping them, there's nothing that precludes them from coming back to the department and the department determining we'd like to work with these groups to come up with an MOU and present it to us. I think this is superfluous. We don't need to do this. We can put them all in the same boat, which is the denial, and if the department chooses to pick some of these for reasons that they know of, they can bring it back to us with an MOU if they can agree to one. We don't need to do this. I don't think it stands up to the law, and I think it's unnecessary.
Thank you, Mr. Romer. Let the board members decide on their vote. All in favor of supporting the motion on the table by Ms. Givens and seconded by Ms. Johnson, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm opposed.
Mr. Romer's opposed. Motion carries. Next item.
Next item 24, was a read. On motion of Ms. Dastuk, seconded by Ms. Bouquet, the Recovery School District Committee deferred until the board meeting on Thursday, December 9th. Consideration of RSD contracts and leases for receive and defer.
Okay, these are items, board members, that are received and referred and not acted on. Am I correct in that? So is there a motion to receive and refer?
So moved.
By Ms. Bouquet, second by Ms. Givens. Is that a
I'll
second?
second it, and I need to ask a question.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Givens, and she has a question. Is there someone from RSD here? Okay.
Yesterday, Mr. Gutierrez, I heard someone mention that a charter applicant was paying $19 approximately per square foot for rental of a building, and someone in the department or someone at NACSA said that that was above the average cost.
Ms. Givens, this
It is.
isn't,
It
is this
is.
germane to this contract?
It's going to get back to the rental rates.
Okay.
That's what we're talking. We're talking
Okay.
about lease and rental rates, and this is going to go, I'm just
Good connection.
just saying what I'm thinking. Don't we presently pay for the rental space for, what is it, Jeff's, the Morris XF Jeff Charter School? And it has caused me to want to go back and look at that lease space again, because I believe the last meeting we approved
It says-
a rental of $45,000 a month.
Kevin Gutierrez, Deputy Superintendent with Recovery School District. We do have several properties that we do have covered by FEMA in terms of leased space from either the Archdiocese or other types of locations like the Welcome School, where Morris Jeff is located at this time. But those are FEMA-related expenses that are, or those are costs that are actually covered by FEMA.
I understand that it may be covered by FEMA, but what I'd like to ask, Madam Chairman, is that we, when we get these leases, be mindful of the fact that there are standards to be applied for leasing space for charter schools. And I had a problem with the $45,000 per month when I heard it, and now that I understand that $19 a square foot is more than the average rental for a charter school, I am severely alarmed that we are paying that much rent for rent, and I don't care where the funds come from. If it's public funds, it should be be expended at the same rate, no matter where the funds come from. And I am really disturbed to learn that you have a standard for rentals, and we have not been apprised of it, and we may be overpaying for some of the things that we're doing, and that's my concern.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Givens. A correction for the makers of this motion is that the recommendation in the minutes is different from the packet. Again, it was a late night last night. The recommended action is to receive and delete. Will the makers of the motion revise their motion to receive and delete? That would be Ms. Buquet and Ms. Givens. Yes? Okay. The motion on the table is to receive and delete. Is there any opposition? Motion passes. Next item.
You could do it at the end.
Is that 29?
Item 29 is a read.
Okay.
On motion of Ms. Dastu, seconded by Ms. Bouquet, the Recovery School District Committee deferred until the board meeting on Thursday, December 9th. Consideration of an update report regarding meetings of the Oversight Committee for the School Facilities Master Plan of New Orleans. And I believe Ms. Johnson asked me to pull this item.
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Johnson, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, I'd like to, and I was looking for my packet from that on yesterday.
Can we get a page number out of the packet, please?
It's page 35
Board
of the
member?
red packet.
Okay, if you have your packet,
I'd
it's on
like to
page
know that the
39.
president is taking off her coat. Does that mean things are getting hot in here, or what?
It could be something else, but I'm not going to say it in public.
26 and 28.
I like my explanation better.
I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, ma'am.
To the Oversight Committee for their next meeting. That's why I had this pulled, and that is, I'd like to move that they seriously take a look at the current master plan, make a decision on the buildings, take a look at the buildings that we're building, and I guess my concern is, are we overbuilding? And if there are opportunities to use some buildings that maybe the Archdiocese or some other people have that are vacant, I think that we need to start looking at facilities a little bit different than the way we are currently looking at them. And I am concerned about the building. I'm very concerned about the buildings that we're making.
Well,
All I
Mr. Wade,
wanted to do was to direct something to.
Is that a motion, Ms. Johnson? Did you put that in the
Yeah, I'll
form?
make a motion. It's just to go
You
to
don't
them.
need to make a motion. If you think that you can get your point across, then everybody will respond to it. Do you feel the need to make a motion? I'm just trying to
Mr.
get some
Garvey is the chair
clarification.
of the, co-chair of the Oversight Committee. Do I need to put that in a formal motion?
I don't think you need to.
Okay, thank you,
Then
Ms.
I will assume it will
The
be
superintendent would, thank you, Ms. Johnson. The superintendent would like to speak to it, and then I have a point.
is this on the table now?
It is.
Well, when you come up with these motions and you just, come off the top of your head, it's what?
It's not a motion now. It's just a
Oh,
recommendation.
it's a motion, not a motion.
Recommendation.
All right. I'll deal with Ms. Johnson and we'll get specifics. That's what I want to find
Okay.
out. And
Madam
I'll work
Chair?
with her to get those specifics.
Madam Chair?
Yes, ma'am, I will recognize you in just a moment.
Okay.
Okay, well, okay, so we have a recommendation. The superintendent has stated that he will work with you. Board members, this item, as recommended in the packet, is to receive and delete. Is there a motion to receive and delete?
So moved.
By Ms. Buquet, is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mr. Romer. Ms. Gibbons.
Madam Chair, may I also ask that what is this committee called? The Master Plan Oversight Committee receive a list of guidelines so that when we are reviewing building usage contracts and leases, that we know what the range of charges
that's
should
not
be
part of the
based on
oversight
a
committee
square
charge?
foot. I've learned that we have a new standard, and that is that there's an average cost per square foot for leasing space for charter schools. And I want to know whether or not that enters into.
Ms. Givens, is that part, is that captured
asking
in
for
the,
those
in the
guidelines.
charge? Wait a minute, is that captured in the charge of this committee? I think these are business matters that belong to the board.
Well, Ms. Johnson.
If you have,
is
Ms. Johnson
asking
has a
us-
concern about facilities that we adopted within our master plan, and you have concerns, this is not something we should shirk
I'm
off to an
asking-
oversight committee.
I'm
This is
asking-
this board's responsibility to
asking,
consider.
Madam President, I'm just asking for guidance if we are looking at usage. She said something about putting schools in buildings that were owned by the archdiocese.
That's not within the charge to the oversight committee.
Well, that was Ms. Johnson's recommendation, so I'm asking.
I'll be happy to get with you and talk to
Yeah.
you about that, Ms.
But if there are concerns, this board needs to address them.
All right.
I mean, we're the governing authority. They're an advisory group, and I do appreciate their value and what they do, but we have to insist that this group stay within their original charge that this board set. And I think that's been a problem. And you acknowledged it, I think Ms. Johnson acknowledged it. Mr. Garvey's chair, will you acknowledge that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to receive and delete. Is there any opposition? Motion carries.
Next item that was pulled was item 30. On motion of Ms. Dastug, seconded by Ms. Bouquet, the Recovery School District Committee deferred until the board meeting on Thursday, December 9th, 2010, schools in Orleans Parish. Consideration of the process and timeline for the 2011-2012 common application for RSD direct run and charter schools in Orleans Parish.
Okay, this is page 40 if you're on your packet if you have it, and the recommendation is to approve. You're ready.
I move approval.
Thank you, Ms. Buquet. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Romer, and I'll recognize you for a question after the presentation. We're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The presentation is on page 41 in your packet. It is fairly self-explanatory in terms of the timeline and steps. We haven't changed from the previous few years. The only things that have been adjusted, obviously, are the dates to solve for the new calendar year. But the overall summary is that on April 8th, the applications will be due on the 29th. We ask that schools complete their lottery if necessary. On May 6th, parent notification will take place by then. And on May 20th is the deadline for parents to select and enroll in a school. And as you'll see in page 2, there's some descriptive activities that we recommend that take place within that timeline.
Okay. I have a question by Ms. Johnson and then Mr. Bayard. Ms. Johnson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. On the common application timelines, there's some concern that I have, which I'm going to try to bring up in another motion. But what it says, what I think it says, is that applications are
We
due
keep saying that.
April the 8th. Now, that's for new children trying to enroll
Got it.
someplace.
Ms. Johnson,
Linda, would you get closer to the mic,
Or is that for
please?
all children?
Those are for students who are currently enrolled in a school will continue to be enrolled. They don't need to reapply.
So these are for new children?
Correct, or
Want to
children looking
change
to
schools.
change schools. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, because I'm going to make another motion under something else. Thank you.
Ms. Dastard.
I have Mr. Bayard and then Ms.
Yes,
Gibbons.
Kevin. On the lotteries, all schools don't have lotteries. It's just the ones that have specified curriculums that might appeal to some, or is it every school can have a lottery if they're filled up, or?
That's correct. Every school can have a lottery if there is an over-demand for the particular grade level and space allocation.
Billy
You
Danny.
have public notice and a public lottery draw, or is it something that somebody pulls,
The lotteries are held locally at the school,
Okay,
and then the wait list, of course, is maintained.
all right.
I'll let you go. Does that answer your question, Mr. Bayard? Ms. Gibbons.
Mr. Gutierrez,
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
you're saying that the schools have lotteries?
They have lotteries. They must have a lottery if they are more applicants than spaces.
Yes, it's not count, it's a must, isn't it?
But only if they have more applicants than spaces.
So when do we publish for parents a listing of schools that will anticipate having vacancies and how many vacancies there are, so that they know which schools they stand a chance of getting their children into?
That is currently held on a school-by-school basis, and I think what you're pointing to is our thrust to have a common application that's an electronic application process in the future, or some more robust system so that we can, I think, work a coordinated system that'll help to do exactly what you're saying over the future. That is absolutely that's on the forefront, but it is not. Right now, we are continuing with our paper process that we've done over the past 3 years.
But even with the paper process, can't we estimate how many vacancies there are going to be in a school at the grade level, and at least, put that out as a guide of potential vacancies, so that it's not so? It's still a lot of a bit of a crapshoot. If I want to apply to your school and Aaron's school is the school with the vacancy, I'm wasting my time if I just apply to you.
The guide is, we do have a parent guide, as you know, and that guide does not include the number of vacancies because it would be out of date the moment we printed it. So the school vacancies are communicated by the schools directly to parents as they call in.
Yes. I don't think you're hearing me. But thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Ms. Givens, we have a proper motion and second on this item. Is there any opposition to approve? Hearing none, motion carries. Mr. Romer, I think there's one more item on this.
Next item was NOI on item 57. And I don't believe we actually conducted the business, so we need to conduct the business and then do a read for the NOI.
Okay, is there a motion is there a motion to approve this item as notice of intent?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Buquet. Second by Mr. Romer. Any discussion? Hearing none, motion carries.
And I suppose now I need to read it on motion of Ms. Bouquet, seconded by Mr. Romer. The Recovery School District Committee recommends that the board approve as a notice of intent Bulletin 129, Chapters 9, 13, 15, and 17.
Okay, there's a motion. Once you've read it, is that when I should act on the motion, now that it's been read? Let's try that again. We have a motion now that's been read, and I think I have a proper first and second. Any opposition? Motion carries again. Okay, this concludes the business of the Recovery School District Committee. Mr. Romer?
Ms. Johnson had an item she wanted to pull.
I'd like to pull number 23.
Okay, Ms. Johnson would like to pull item number 23. Well, Ms. Johnson, that's already been approved. Do you want to pull it enough to have to pull it out and reconsider it?
I'd like to pull it and reconsider it. I thought we had, that Mr. Roman and I
Okay.
agreed to pull it earlier.
Okay, Ms. Johnson has asked that we pull item 23 for a reconsideration. And does she have a second?
I'll second.
Who is that?
Me.
Ms. Givens. Ms. Givens, second. Ms. Johnson?
Okay, what, I'd like to amend the recommendation, make a motion to amend it.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I need to vote on I'm pulling the item for reconsideration. Thank you, Mr. Lee.
I want to make a comment.
Thanks for keeping me in line. First of all, can I go ahead and get that vote out of the way? Okay, all in favor of reconsidering item 23. This is on page 10 of your Recovery School District Committee meetings. Board members, this is the governance issue that was...
It's not governance.
Isn't it? The recommendations for schools transferred? Yes.
Transfer, it's not governance.
Okay, this is a transfer issue, excuse me, that we were debated late into last night. I need a motion. I have a motion to pull this item from the agenda. I have a second. Any opposed?
I'm opposed.
Mr.
Opposed.
Okay, I need a roll call to oppose the motion to reconsider item 23.
I want to make a comment, if I may.
I'm going to let Mr. Lee comment, and then we'll take the vote.
We spent a lot of time on this yesterday, and I think
4 hours.
thoroughly discussed every item. And I just am offering this for thought. We need to have some kind of process or consideration before we just pull items and completely redo because an individual board member wants it, me or anybody else. I just think we don't
Oscar?
need to rehash.
Are you listening? Okay.
I would just ask that you please think about some kind of process to say only if it's really significant.
Okay.
And I don't know how you define that, but we just shouldn't pull every item for reconsideration simply because somebody maybe didn't get what they wanted. We had ample time for discussion.
Yeah,
Madam Chairman?
Ms. Buquet.
I would like to point, I think following Robert's Rules of Order is, and taking a vote on whether or not to reconsider will help us get to where you're trying to get, Mr. Lee.
But I do think we are addressing, we've asked BESE staff to really look at the way we conduct our business and to try to bring forth some recommendations for the board to act on in January that will improve the quality of our meetings. You acted on something, you received something this month, and Ms. Fosberg, I'd like for you to be responsive to Mr. Lee's concern. There may be something else we can do. Okay, there is a motion.
Madam Chair.
And Ms. Johnson.
The reason why I pulled this item is because we had not taken action on the common application process. And my amendment is, and I just said it a few minutes ago, I wanted to make a motion concerning that. That's the reason why I pulled it. We had not taken action on, we just
Okay,
took
we're
action
talking about number 23, Ms. Johnson.
No, but my amendment has to do with the common application process as putting something into the transfer of schools. There's a reason for this. And I can tell you what it is. I just heard.
No, Ms. Johnson, I don't think that's appropriate. We had 3.5 hours of discussion on this item. It is a comprehensive plan that was discussed at length. If the board wants to reopen this, they're going to let me know in about 1 minute when I call this roll call. Ms. Johnson has made a motion, and there's a second to reconsider item number 23. I'd like a vote on that. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bayard? Yes. Mr. Bayard votes yes. Mr. Bennett?
No.
Mr. Bennett votes no. Ms. Bradford?
No.
Ms. Bradford votes no. Ms. Buquet? No. Ms. Buquet votes no. Mr. Garvey?
No.
Mr. Garvey votes no. Ms. Givens?
Yes.
Ms. Givens votes yes. Mr. Geis is absent. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson votes yes. Mr. Lee?
No.
Mr. Lee votes no. Mr. Romer?
No.
Mr. Romer votes no. Ms. Dastig, do you care to vote?
I'll vote no.
Ms. Dastig votes no. 3 yeas, 7 nays.
Madam
Motion
President.
fails.
So the motion will not be, this item will not be reconsidered, and that actually concludes the business of the Recovery School District Committee.
So we
You need
will
to speak to this, Ms. Givens.
I'd like to be recorded as voting no on item 23.
Yes, ma'am.
I originally
Well-
voted no, and Madam Chairman, also, the reason I made that comment earlier is because without backup, it's hard to
But
marry.
you are, excuse me, Mr. Bayard, I didn't recognize you. I'm trying to respond to Ms. Givens. Ms. Givens, you are recorded as voting no. 23.
Yes, but in regard to board minutes, I
Yeah,
want
she
to
has to
know
do it
that
again.
Oh, say it again. Okay, I recognize that. Mr. Bayard, do you want to be recorded as voting no again?
But
Okay.
the whole issue I mentioned earlier, and this is future.
Yes, you don't need to explain. We'll make
just
sure
hope
that
we do
the
something
record's
about it.
recorded. Both of you is no. Okay, that concludes the business of the Recovery School District
When
Committee.
is it time to do a receive and refer to the RSD committee?
Voting yes when you're not here. That's what I'm saying.
I-
You have to vote no.
She could
You can make a motion why don't you start working on a motion to do a receive and refer, and we'll do that at the end of the meeting. Okay, next committee, please.
Next committee is 10I, State Authorized School Oversight Committee. Mr. Garvey.
Yes, on behalf of the State Authorized School Oversight Committee, I'd recommend for approval items 1 through 30, pulling item number 9 and item number 12, and noting that item 30 is a notice of intent.
Okay, is there a second to Mr. Garvey's motion?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Buquet. Mr. Garvey.
Yes, number 9. On motion of Mr. Romer, seconded by Ms. Gibbons, the State Authorized School Oversight Committee recommends that the board approve a material amendment to the charter governing the International School of Louisiana, allowing the International School of Louisiana, Inc. to expand its school to a second site during the 2010-2011 school year. And I believe that Ms. Bindley would like to address this item.
Ms. Bentley?
Thank you. We would ask that during the 2010-11 school year be deleted. Obviously, the school is not going to use this site only for that school year, so we would ask that that motion end after second site, period.
So move.
Okay, we have a motion to amend by Ms. Buquet, a second by Ms. Bradford. Any opposition to Ms. Bentley's recommendation? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item, Mr. Garvey.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. I'm looking at item number 12. Are we at that yet?
We're moving to it right now. Mr. Garvey will read it, and I'll recognize you, Ms. Givens. Mr. Garvey.
That's fine.
On motion of Mr. Romer, seconded by Ms. Givens, the State Authorized School Oversight Committee recommends that the board defer until the board meeting on Thursday, December 9th, 2010, consideration of the Type 2 charter school proposal submitted by Amachi Charter Schools Association to operate Amachi Leadership Elementary Charter School.
Okay.
I would make my, oh, I'm sorry.
I need to recognize Ms. Givens and then Mr. Romer.
Romer.
Okay, Mr. Romer?
I would make my motion here consistent with what I did previously, where no one else agreed with me, but that's okay. That in fact we deny this application. This would be my motion.
Okay, there's a motion to deny the application. Is there a second?
I have a question. Second.
Second by Ms. Buquet. Who has a question?
I do.
Ms. Givens.
Mr. Romer, wasn't one of the Amachi Group's charters approved?
No.
Yes.
This is the one, I'm sorry.
The question
May I?
wasn't one of their charters approved?
Who are you addressing your question
I was
to?
asking you. Oh, Mr. Romer, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Mr. Romer, do you want to defer to superintendent, or you want to
Yeah,
answer this
please.
question yourself? Mr.
Yeah,
Superintendent.
There were 5 charters. 4 were rejected by NACSA. 1 was approved by NACSA, and the department did not propose approval of the Amachi proposal coming from NACSA. So the one that we're discussing right now is the one that the department has not has presented for rejection, if you will.
So this is the reverse situation in which NACSA approved, but you recommended denial.
Right. This is reverse of MLK, where NACSA denied and I moved approval, and this one they approved and I moved rejection. I removed rejection of about 3 or 4 NACSA-approved items.
All right, then if we are saying, and this is what I believed Mr. Romer was saying initially, that we support the decisions made by NACSA, that perhaps this is an application that should have been approved rather than objected? I'm trying to follow your logic, Mr. Romer.
It's a good question, and I'm thinking through. But here, am I right?
Yes, Mr. Romer. Y'all are really doing well with this.
Wait, really what?
Question.
You're
I
learning.
think
This
what
is
we
good.
asked them to do was amend their application.
Yes.
Okay? My point is we're not giving anybody else that ability to go amend their application. So that's my point of trying to be consistent is we either give everybody the green light to go amend their application or we don't. Now, the second step to this ultimate process will be to how do we improve the process so we can distinguish between these applicants.
I don't remember
But and perhaps my logic's flawed on this one. Y'all will tell me shortly, I'm certain.
Okay, let's get.
That was my thing.
We discussed this at length, Ms. Givens, again yesterday. I think board members, the motion is clear. That we deferred until today. There is a motion on the floor. If you want to speak to the motion, let's speak to the motion and let's move toward action. Ms. Givens.
What I don't remember, and I left here last night at 10 o'clock, is why was this deferred until today? What was the reason that Mr. Romer and I seconded, so I must have been following it last night, but I really don't remember why this is.
Let's get that question answered. Let's see if anyone else has any questions, and let's go ahead and move on this. I think board members know where they are.
The reason it was deferred was the objection of the superintendent to the application. And the question was, did the remainder of, and Ms. Bentley will perhaps clarify what I say, but was the remainder of the application, other than perhaps who they had chosen as their provider, was acceptable? And it got into our discussion is there adequate time to address those issues, et cetera, et cetera. I'm suggesting now that the proper thing to do to be consistent with what we did previously would be to deny this application based on the superintendent's recommendation.
So, Madam President, just to make
Okay,
sure.
I'm going to, would anyone else like to speak to this item?
I'm not speaking, I'm
I
asking.
know, one second. Would anyone else like to speak to this item? Anyone else have a question
like
on
to
this
hear from
item?
Ms.
Ms. Bendeley would like to speak to it, and then Ms. Gibbons, I'm going to let you close.
Okay, I'm not trying to close, I just want to make sure
I'm trying to
that
close.
okay, you're trying to close. I'm trying to make sure that we're doing what we said we wanted to do, and there must be a reason we pulled it, and now you said it's to hear from Ms. Bendeley.
Ms. Bendeley, please answer our questions.
As I recall, the reason this item was pulled yesterday is because this was actually the second charter school application that was considered yesterday at about 10 o'clock in the morning, and at the time, there were still questions about what options the board had. Obviously, throughout the day, we clarified that after looking at the law, so I believe that's why this item was pulled.
And
And your recommendation?
And our recommendation stands.
I thought I heard someone say, Mr. Roma say that you were supposed to look at whether or not this application, the only thing that was wrong with this application was the choice of their EMO, and whether or not the application.
That was the department's concern. The
That was-
evaluators might have noted additional concerns, even though at the end, the evaluators recommended approval, but the provider was the concern that the department had.
And that's a big only, board members. We need to face that. That's a very big only.
So the direction that they, the idea that they still can correct their application and resubmit by January 31st is still on the table.
The law does
they can
allow
do
them
that?
to do that.
Okay, so I wanted to be sure.
Logistically, there may be issues, but the law does allow it.
All right, so I want to be sure that the provider understands, because, I'm totally confused.
Okay.
But I think I've got this one.
I think you do, Miss. Okay, there's a motion and a second to deny. Any opposition to that motion? Motion carries. Last item, Mr. Garvey.
Last item is a notice of intent.
Oh, did you move on that? Yeah, we're fine. Okay, we're good. Okay. That concludes Mr. Garvey's committee. We move on.
We move to 10J, Student School Performance and Support Committee. Mr. Bayard.
Yes, on behalf of Student and School Performance and Support Committee, I'd like to move in global items 1 through 17, noting number 7 is a read, and 13, 15, and 17 is a notice of intent. And please let the record note of my opposition to the item concerning science textbook adoption and letter grade.
Okay, duly noted. Is there a motion to approve all items? We can do it that way, all items except item number 7, which is a read. I have a motion by, and is that what I'm getting, Mr. Bennett? And a second by somebody? Thank you, Mr. Lee.